Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Dennis Heil, and I am diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder with severe depression and high-functioning autism. I've been living with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, 15 of which I spent undiagnosed. In 2009, I experienced a depressive psychotic break that led to my diagnosis of type 2 bipolar disorder. I would be diagnosed with autism a few years later. In my podcast, Bluntly Bipolar, I'm going to share with you my experiences and the hard lessons I've learned trying to find some peace and happiness in my life. I hope that by sharing my experiences, others can avoid learning these lessons the hard way. I'm not a mental health professional. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone. Listener discretion is advised. Anger played a pivotal role in feeding my bipolar disorder and depression, as well as complicating social and emotional matters through my high-functioning autism. In this mini-series prefixed on anger, I will be exploring the role anger played in my mental unwellness and how it was used as a weapon to manipulate me as a straight white man from a blue-collar working-class background. This is episode 19, on anger. Where does a straight white man belong? As I get older and reflect back on my life, particularly about the question of belonging, I come to realize that much of the loneliness I've experienced was engineered. As a working class straight white man who does not think that any of those qualities makes me any better or worse than anyone else, there are a few places where I feel like I should be. I've recently came to the realization that it is entirely by design. There are a lot of jokes and observations about white Americans not having culture, thus we have to take it from others. And as I look at society, trying to find a place where I fit, I realize that the spaces which remain are only accepting of a certain type of white, the white Christian nationalist. Loneliness and isolation are fuel for anger and depression. That anger and depression is just there, festering, until someone comes along with a target for it. It's the illegals taking jobs from hardworking Americans. It's blacks who won't sit down and be quiet about their oppression. It's women who don't value your traditional masculinity. And because men like me have been subjected to this indoctrination since birth, we can't ever be viewed as safe by any of these other groups because of the biases we may not even be aware of. And as a white person, even the path of growing from a child into an adult is set up to create isolation. As I get older, I have come to believe that the whole independent American spirit thing is purposely marketed and sold to white people, not just for money, but to fracture our communities. Because unless I like white supremacy or Jesus, there's really no place for someone like me to land. Consider the traditional narrative of graduating high school, moving out on your own, going to your dream college. Why? Why is that the narrative? Why is moving out and away from your community and family framed as a worthy goal, as a measure of coming into adulthood? Other societies encourage things like communal living with family. However, in white America, it's looked down on to live together with family. You're not independent. You're not a real man if you can't take care of yourself. How will you find a wife that way? Why does anyone have a dream college to begin with? What children would be dreaming of more school and work if it weren't for marketing? Now, personally, when I was in high school, I took a vocational program for electronics repair. At some point, we had some tech school recruiter come in to give a presentation. I recall sitting in that presentation, watching the slideshow of images, when the old autistic pattern recognition started kicking in. I noticed something peculiar about the slideshow. Every picture of students they showed at their school was of attractive young women, but not too attractive. Yet everyone in my class, the class ahead of us, and the one that came behind us were all men. The second thing I noticed was a minor detail about the way one of the models was holding a soldering iron in a picture. Now, a soldering iron has a plastic handle to hold onto and a metal barrel that heats up with a metal tip that focuses the heat for soldering. A girl in one of the pictures was holding the iron like a pencil by the metal barrel, which would normally heat up to 600 degrees. No one with even the most basic knowledge of soldering would ever hold a soldering iron that way. It was clear to me then that she was not a student of that program, as she was implied to be. Now, as an adult, I fully understand that the pitch deck was created by a marketing team who selected models that were attractive but not too attractive, because many men find extremely attractive women intimidating, and that's a turnoff. Instead, they aimed for cute girl next door vibes for the predominantly teenage male audience. But as a 15-year-old kid, all I could think to ask was, why is she holding a soldering iron like that? Which the presenter did not appreciate. And in retrospect, I understand why. They weren't there to present information so we could make an informed decision about our future education. They were there to sell their school through any means necessary, and that included implying that there was a buffet of women to pursue. I think back to some of the common narratives that I was sold, like go abroad to study or travel to find yourself. Go to your dream school. You want to escape your hometown, don't you? You want to experience the world, right? That narrative was created for middle to upper class white people, the largest target consumer demographic with the money to spend, because that's how marketers and public relations people think. When you're selling a product or an idea, you focus on who is actually going to buy your product. And that's a common misconception that outsiders have about marketing and messaging. Why would I give a shit what someone who makes $30,000 a year thinks about my advertisement from Mercedes-Benz? The only real benefit there is brand awareness, but brand awareness can't easily be tied to a healthy return on investment. The same thing is true with the messaging of ideologies in modern politics. That's why there's so little focus on the middle ground of American politics. It always feels like the people in the center or the moderates get left behind. It's because they don't feel passionately enough about the thing to take a strong stand, which makes it harder to influence them. The return on investment is much better when you appeal to the extremes. And America is all about money, of course. The people on the extreme ends feel very passionately about their brands, and that's most cost effective to lean into. So, in other words, it's far easier to sell a Benz to a CEO making millions than it is to a janitor making $30,000 a year. Then you have the narrative of white guilt and apologies. I have never, not once in my life, ever had any person of color want me to apologize for being white. Furthermore, I don't think that any reasonable person of color would ever expect that. But as a straight white man, I've long been conditioned to think that my opinion should matter, and it should matter more than others. But why? For what reason? What difference does that make? How does it help anyone? How does it correct the issue? This is performative and self-centered. I feel bad, so let me make marginalized people's pain and struggles about me instead of addressing whatever role I play in causing harm. It's essentially turning myself into the victim instead of hearing the actual victims of these systems. I've always hated the messaging of, you're just not angry enough, you're just not angry enough. Why do I have to be angry to try to do the right thing? Why can't I just choose to do better things because it's the right thing to do? And personally, I have to say, I make much worse decisions when I'm angry. There are very few times in my life where I can think back and conclude, you know what? Anger really improved that situation. It mostly just makes things fantastically worse, like throwing gasoline on a fire. But cultivating white anger also serves the greater purpose of the strategy of divide and conquer. Most people don't want to be around angry men because you never know if an angry man is going to turn violent. The loneliness and isolation creates more depression, which creates more anger, which pushes people away, and it just repeats into a self-reinforcing cycle. It becomes another tool of the manipulation cycle. They told me I should be angry at people of color and women because of what white men have done and are doing. But I haven't done anything to anyone. I don't have that kind of power or influence. I get angry and defensive because fuck you for judging me. Do you think I won't swing back if you take a swing at me? But then the manipulator can come in with validation for my anger and say, see, you should be angry. It's because of feminism. It's because of black people. It's because of immigrants. It's because they don't value traditional masculinity. But we value you. We understand your anger. Come join us. Validation of your anger feels great. And that offer looks more attractive because where else welcomes a straight white man than those communities? And that brings me to my next point. I resent the way that the white supremacist view of race traders has been implemented into society at large. And if you're not familiar, white supremacists assume that a white person is either a potential recruit or a race trader if they won't be recruited. White Christian nationalists have done this with patriotism. If you look at conservative messaging, the default is that if you were born in America, you should be pro-American. Why are you criticizing America? Why are you questioning the president? Why don't you value patriarchy? Why don't you value tradition? And if you're not patriotic, then what are you? There's nothing worse to a white supremacist than a race traitor, because other white people are more likely to listen to them. They cannot have white people effectively speaking out or exposing the system for what it is to the whites who don't yet see it. But that also ties in with the idea of traditional masculinity or patriarchy. Patriarchy and traditional masculinity is mostly a rebranded vehicle of white supremacy. Because if you think of patriarchy like a long table with a man seated at the head of it, there is no world in which white conservatives want that man to be a man of color. I've never understood why any person of color is a conservative. You know that the people that you're sat beside at the table would prefer you to be the person serving them, right? And that's where they will be once they stop being a useful tool for deflection. It's an easy way for them to say, we can't be racist because we have a token minority here with us. But as black folks will tell you, tokens will eventually get spent. Even the love they claim to have is twisted and distorted, a reflection of their personal views. Contrary to popular opinion, you're allowed to be critical of someone or something you love. But what's the common message? You're not a patriot if you question or criticize America. You don't love your country. And it doesn't matter if you're just some random Joe Schmo or even an anti-war veteran. It's the same bullshit. But authentic love doesn't overlook flaws or wrongdoing. It sees them, it holds them accountable, and it encourages you to correct them if they're wrong. Now, personally, I know I need that. I know I'm a deeply flawed person who's gotten a lot of things wrong in my life. Sometimes I need someone to say to me, hey, you're fucking up and you need to correct course. But if you're critical, then you must not love your country. And why wouldn't you love this country, white man? It was built for you. But the real citizens of this nation aren't meant to be white people like me. The real citizens are the white people who buy into the system. And even then, there are multiple groups of white in that dynamic too. Wealthy whites consider the rest of us white trash, a resource to be used and exploited the same as people of color. And since I'm mentally ill, that gives me an extra layer of stigma to carry as well. Bipolar disorder brings with it its own level of stigma, even in medical and mental health communities. They have no problem feeding us into the meat grinder of the military-industrial complex. They're perfectly fine with fleecing you of everything through insurance scams. Then you have the opioid epidemic. They tell you that college is liberal indoctrination while sending their kids to college. Hell, it goes back to the formation of America, when Manifest Destiny was convincing poor white people to blaze their way across America to slaughter and be slaughtered by indigenous people. What does it even mean to be a straight white man when you start seeing America's flaws? I don't want my country to be responsible for stealing from other countries and cultures. I don't want my country to be a bully on the world stage that everyone has to fear. I want my country to be respected, which is never something that can come from fear. Strong men understand that true strength comes from respect and restraint. Guys like Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump would be hilarious if they weren't hurting so many people for no other reason than their fragile masculinity. A man who needs fear to gain respect is small. It lacks integrity. And I don't want my whiteness to be seen as something to distrust or be fearful of. I don't want people of color to feel out of place under attack by virtue of being around white folks. I want the promises this country has made to be kept to people of color, the indigenous, and everyone else it's stolen from. I don't want my sexuality to be used as a weapon to impose fear or isolation on other people. Doesn't matter if that's gay and trans people afraid of a phobic response, or women who have no idea if I'm safe or not. But I know what I want doesn't matter. And not because I'm white, but because that's the way things are now, and the way they will continue to be for some time. I am forced to accept the way things are while pushing for change in the ways that I can. I am challenged to hold and accept these two conflicting truths. I resent that my perceptions have been cultivated from birth and that I should be grateful for the manipulation. As much time as I've spent deconstructing what I've picked up from society, I still have those errant thoughts that slip through. And I get a flash of anger every time it happens. It reminds me that, hey, it was all engineered to be this way. All my life I fall out of place. But nowadays I wonder if that was the point. Because I know that speaking about what I am, the way I am, makes me a traitor in the eyes of white Christian nationalists. But because I was born with white skin and a sexual preference, I'm supposed to be happy to be part of their little group. I'm supposed to be okay with my straightness, making trans or gay people feel like outcasts and afraid. I'm supposed to be okay with my whiteness being used as a weapon of intimidation and terror. I'm supposed to be okay with my maleness depriving women of agency and choice. I'm supposed to be okay with my country exploiting, bombing, and stealing from others. Fuck that. I reject the notion that I owe loyalty to anything I didn't choose with clear and honest information. As frankly, I'd rather be alone. Thank you for spending your time with me. Don't forget to subscribe and share my podcast with someone you think it might help. Consider leaving an honest review or rating on your platform of choice.